Hello YouTube! Today I will be discussing Kirby's Epic Yarn, specifically speedrunning Kirby's Epic Yarn, and the strategies that are used in exclusive levels to make the game faster. I will not be discussing larger factors that are present throughout the entire game such as goal games and patches, but will instead be teaching you level exclusive strategies if you want to learn to speedrun the game yourself. I hope you enjoy! To perform a frame-perfect missile, you must execute a one-button press at the exact frame that Kirby's cockpit connects with the wheels of the tank transformation. Keep in mind that this is frame-perfect, with a window of 1/60th of a second to pull off, so don't expect to get it every single attempt. One thing that I've seen Kirby speedrunners struggle with a lot are the flowers of flower fields. A consistent cue for the first set of flowers begins with holding right as you hold onto the flower while on the ground. You will then want to jump as soon as Kirby gets lifted from the ground, which will get you through the first set of flowers without any trouble. As for the second set of flowers, you'll want to begin with a short hop so Kirby can gain momentum by swinging on the flower, at which point you can jump as Kirby begins swinging back up. If done successfully, you can pull this off twice in a row and get past the flowers very quickly. Rainbow Falls has some interesting movement. In general, you would like to move in the currents that are pushing you towards your goal and avoid moving in the currents that are pushing you away from the goal. Simple stuff. The penguin transformation includes a strategy that involves skipping the cutscene that takes way too long to tell you that this transformation includes 2 buttons. Seriously, who thought this was a good idea? All you want to do is hover over the beginning section until you get to about this orange part of the ground, in which case, you're good. Nobody likes this guy. So you'll probably be glad to hear that you can avoid fighting it entirely by carrying a bow from one of these bow waddle dees all the way until the fight and slicing right through them. Here's a very useful strategy that I definitely don't struggle with at all. You can make it to the goal on the earliest possible cycle of these balloon waddle dees by playing the entire level without even a single bonk or mistake, which is very difficult but very satisfying to pull off. Because this is full level optimization, there aren't really any cues to getting this trick. How do you skip an entire section of the Fangora boss fight? With no effort whatsoever. On Fangora's second phase, he will begin spitting fire at you, which Kirby can grab, despite being made out of yarn. You can keep these items between phases, which means it's possible to throw an item at him after he's done his second phase, which skips an entire cutscene. Pyramid Sand Skip, a strategy that skips waiting a second for some quicksand and potentially tornadoes, can be done with 2 different methods. The first method requires grabbing this Waddle Dee, jumping and parachuting off the highest platform on this pyramid, and using the Waddle Dee to help you cross the gap. The second method just requires jumping and grabbing onto this patch a bit for some extra height, at the expense of some extra beads. Though this is used to skip waiting for quicksand, the success of this skip heavily relies on the cycle of the tornadoes, and only saves 1 or 2 seconds in total if done correctly. Remember how in Rainbow Falls, during the penguin transformation, you want to avoid hills as much as possible? This applies for 90% of the transformations in this game. So if there's a transformation with hills, chances are you want to avoid them, including this one. Bombs in Kirby's Epic Yarn take much too long to blow up for us speedrunners, so instead, we grab a rocket at the beginning of the level so conveniently placed for us to take, and use that to instantly blow up the wall at the beginning of the level. Surprise, surprise, Cool Cave is a cycle-based stage. There are a few ways to get optimal cycles in Cool Cave, including grabbing this bat at the end of the snake section and using it to kill this giant rolling clod, saving about 2 seconds. The icicle section is also very hard to get through as fast as possible, as even a single bonk can cost you the best possible cycle. Though, if done correctly, you can save up to 15 seconds in this section alone. Early Taro is a strategy at the very beginning of Dino Jungle, which of course relies on cycles. For a consistent setup, you want to jump onto the purple dino when Kirby lines up with this orange flower and immediately grab onto the spiral. You want to jump off the dino when the top of Kirby's head lines up with this small yellow flower, allowing you to get early Taro. These river rides are a suggestion. There are many ways to skip waiting for these dinos to finish their slow trudge through the rivers, like this using a simple hop, this with a few simple jumps and using the B to your advantage and hoping you're any better at button mashing than me, take this as a warning, and this after waiting for the set of 3 Bs. The most difficult, however, is a strat discovered by a user who goes by Inari, as many strats in this game are. This strat involves jumping from this blue dino around the point when you see this exclamation thing across the red dinos, and jumping from the very edge of the last one and grabbing onto the beast to help you clear the gap. I recommend parachuting before each time you grab onto a bee and holding the 1 button down upon grabbing the second bee for more consistency. There is no fate worse than the one that this Waddle Dee faces, so it's time to avenge them, by completely ignoring the Hot Wings fight. Much like Fangora, we can use Hot Wings items against her by keeping them between phases, except this time we do it with 3. There are 2 versions of this strategy, being 2 cycle Hot Wings and 3 cycle Hot Wings. 2 cycle Hot Wings requires keeping the first bird she throws, followed by quickly grabbing 2 more on her second flyby by lining Kirby up with her wing, grabbing and throwing the first bird, and quickly grabbing the second bird. If done correctly, you should have 2 more birds to throw at her to skip her other 2 phases. This saves up to 2 minutes if done correctly. 3 cycle Hot Wings just requires grabbing 1 bird per cycle instead of 2 in the second. In Toy Tracks, there is a section where you must wait for a robot to make its way across a room in order to make it to the next section. Or so the developers intended. Using this conveniently placed waddle-doo, all we need to do is jump from its head and onto the next platform. A good way to ensure that you don't bonk when trying to get to the higher ledge is by jumping off the waddle-doo as a car and letting go of the D-pad mid-jump. Mushroom Run can be difficult to optimize sometimes, but here are some tips that may or may not be incredibly obvious to you. Of course, mushrooms are bouncy, and can bounce you higher if ground pounded on. What might not be obvious though, is that you can avoid bouncing altogether if you parachute onto one. This can be used to optimize this level and avoid losing your momentum by bouncing on these mushrooms. Sweet Park's donut cycles may be the most inconsistent cycles in Kirby's Epic Yarn. Play the level without making a single mistake and maybe you'll have a chance at getting the best cycle. And if you make a single mistake, say goodbye to making it on time. This is full level optimization, so I can't really give you any cues, but I can tell you that yes, you can ground pound this flan. Amazing, I know. Just make sure that when you do end up getting this cycle, you don't fall into this pit below the donut. All your work will be for nothing. Melody Town doesn't have any strats, but here are some things you might want to note. The symbols in this level behave exactly like the mushrooms in Mushroom Run. In the harp section, you want to continue going right, not up to where the optional music notes section is. Jumping off of this soldier will ensure that you don't get stuck behind this bongo. And lastly, you want to travel in as straight of a line as possible during this last music note section. Would you like to see a magic trick? Watch as we make this squash magically disappear in less than a minute. This strategy goes by very quickly as you need to grab 3 cards immediately as Squashini throws them. A consistent visual cue is to line Kirby's foot up with the end of the second rightmost dark square in the ground, and pressing 1 when the first card lines up with the top of the pumpkin in the background. This saves so much time it can be messed up and tried again before you would finish the boss normally. And by the way, you do want to mess up Squashini's hat trick at the beginning of the level to get to the cards as quickly as possible. Give it up for yet another cycle-based stage, Splash Beach. This stage's cycle-based aspect is in the form of the rising and lowering water. This section in particular is what it leads up to. A good way to ensure that you pass this section quickly is to rush over and grab this umbrella and use Kirby's weird physics to get to this area with the treasure. Obviously we don't want the treasure, so just carry on like normal. Also, you can move while the sun wakes up. Moving fast in the water in this game is painful to say the least. You could just hold 2 for a bit of extra speed, but for maximum speed, you must continuously mash the 2 button. This can be quite annoying. Luckily, the dolphin transformation exists, so you won't have to suffer for too long. Speaking of the dolphin transformation, dashing doesn't make you any faster than swimming normally. Much like Big Bean Vine, this level includes cycles in which it's very difficult to get the earliest possible one. This cycle skip requires full level optimization if you hope to pull this trick off. One thing to note is that you can avoid disposing of both sets of gray blocks by simply ignoring them. If you play the level fast enough, you will be able to catch the platform on the earliest possible cycle. The Kapamari fight has quite a few things to note for speedrunning. You want to begin the fight by grabbing Kapamari's hat and floating behind him so his tentacles can't grab you. You then want to get rid of Kapamari's tentacles using the first piece of the hat. You want to keep the second piece of his hat for later. Now that Kapamari has changed color and shape, you want to wait until his eyes are visible in the dark to hit him with the last piece of his hat. The rest of the fight just goes on like normal. Are you getting tired of cycles yet? Neither am I. The snowball waddle dees are cycle-based and can throw you off very easily. Getting hit by a snowball completely messes up the cycles for the rest of the level, so prepare for a lot of improvisation. One thing that not a lot of people know is that you can mash the D-pad to break out of the snowballs faster if you ever get trapped in one. In Cozy Cabin, you can skip going through the section of blocks at the end of the level by performing a weird trick where Kirby can gain extra height by jumping at the right time while grabbing onto something. You want to grab the second block in this row of 4 and jump at the moment you see Kirby's whip grab onto the block. It's also faster to hold right during this falling section after the second mitten, landing you directly onto a tree. Mount Slide. The most exciting level in Snowland can be done without collecting a single bead, which is really the only time save in this level. So prepare for an overly elaborate explanation on how to do it. At the beginning of the level, you want to jump off the hill when Kirby's foot lines up at the tallest tree, and continue hovering until you see the top of another pine tree, at which you can drop down safely and make it under multiple collections of beads. This arch of beads requires a jump, which I recommend doing as Kirby lines up at the end of this patch of snow. Jump at the end of this tree and hover before you get to the Brontobert to make it through the area safely. You now have a few seconds to question why Mantaplant is doing this. Anyway, jump at the peak of this hill and hover when you're above this row of beads. Kirby has now learned how to fly, so use your wings to boost Kirby in the air when above this row of beads and hover again right before the apex of your jump. These next few jumps consist of hovering above rows of beads, which can be kind of precise. You can now relax for a few seconds again before short hopping over this waddle-ee. Grab some more wings and use them to fly over this set of beads and fall back down immediately. Congratulations, now all you need to do is stay low to the ground and not jump into these beads. Thank you for enduring Mount Slide. Kirby now transforms into a sled for some reason, which is much jankier than the car. Kirby also ice skates when he turns around, which is prioritized over turning into a sled. So I recommend being careful when trying to go fast near the water. In most cases, you will also want to slide down the nearest slope to gain extra speed when Kirby's in sled form. In most cases, it is also faster to take a hit from an ice geyser and damage boost through, unless it's on a sloped surface. You probably know how boss fights go by now, but DDD can be exploited on a whole new level. All you want to do is rush over to the left side of the screen and whip upwards as soon as DDD lands. When you have the star in your hands, quickly run under DDD as he gets back up and grab the other star. DDD will then slide towards you, at which point you can ground pound him and get rid of the first string. You then want to use your 2 stars to get rid of 2 more strings. You can also jump on DDD's head when he's in a dizzy state, allowing you to skip ground pounding him. After that, he will supply you with another star that you can use to defeat him. Welcome to the longest world in the game, Spaceland. This land starts out with an incredibly tough level to speedrun for most. A level containing trains that Kirby must ride. On a cycle, of course. On the second train area, we can skip one train with a precise jump, called a tram jump. Jump onto the train and place Kirby at the edge of the first cart. When the train's first wheel lines up at the second circle in the track, begin running, jump at the edge of the train, and parachute when Kirby lines up with his circle. Practice this, and you should be able to do this trick consistently. When you get to this area and activate the Snip Snap, stand on this Dan and jump shortly before the Snip Snap plugs itself into the plug. And if you're not sure you're going to make a cycle at the end of the level, it's always a good idea to grab the button and approach the ending section from above. Mysterious UFO is probably the most broken level in this game when it comes to speedrunning, with strategies that when put together nearly cut the level in half. We begin the level like normal, until we get to the second gravity switch. But instead of switching the gravity back on, grab this conveniently placed UFO and throw it at the blocks. Congratulations! You can now completely ignore this next section and jump right through it. When you get to this part, make your way up to the gravity switch and use it as intended. We are now going to skip another gravity switch by using this pullable platform to our advantage. There are 2 ways of doing this strategy. You can either pull the button, take a very precise running jump from the edge of the second stair, and parachute when Kirby lines up with the gravity meter, or take a running jump from the first stair and grab the button at the peak of our height. Either way, we just skipped another gravity switch, and from here, we can head directly to the ending of the level. Welcome to Cycles the Level. Basically, your only threat in this level is going to be the planets, and the improvised movement that will come with the different stages of the cycles. And these obnoxious UFOs, of course. An example of improvised movement is this section, where depending on how well you played the level, the planet will be at a different position. However, one thing that will stay consistent is the fact that you always want to travel over these planets, not under them. Don't worry though, by the time you get through all of this, you'll have a 2-minute auto-scroller where you can relax, go to the bathroom, mow the lawn, and finish that novel you've been reading. Meta Knight is the roughest of the bosses for most speedrunners, so I will provide you with everything you need to know. First of all, Meta Knight's movement will or will not be RNG, depending on which phase he's on. In his first phase, he will continuously repeat 2 attacks. In his second phase, he will always begin by throwing 2 blades, and then attack randomly. This is a good time to stock up on yarn balls. His third phase will always begin with the same attack, but will then become RNG hell. You will want to use your stored yarn ball here. The fourth phase is the same. He will begin with the same attack, and then resort to RNG. You will want to hit him before the RNG begins, of course. While it may seem like Meta Knight can only be hit while on the ground, you can actually hit him as long as he is in the middle of an attack, or zooming into position for an attack. With this knowledge, I hope Meta Knight is made a bit easier for you. In Wispy's Forest, you will come across a variety of twiggy woods. Yes, they're called twiggy woods. In the section with 2 twiggy woods right next to each other, it's more optimal to climb the twiggy woods that doesn't lead to the door, simply because you won't have to wait for the other one to rise. And in the section with wispy woods, as is the case for most bosses, you don't have to worry about getting hit, as this is optimal. This is widely agreed to be one of, if not the most difficult strategy in Yarn Kirby speedrunning. You will want to begin this level by rushing over to this bow Waddle Dee and grabbing one of its arrows. You then want to make your way over to this Waddle Dee and jump off its head when the wind begins blowing against you. With this arrow you want to jump as the wind is pushing against you, throw the arrow as you begin descending, and whip once more to make it across the gap. You then want to grab this Waddle Dee and quickly make your way over to the platform with a cannon on it. Immediately jump off the cannon, parachute as you begin descending, and throw the yarn ball. If done correctly, and extremely quickly, you should be 1 wind cycle ahead. These clouds, as similar to the mushrooms of Mushroom Run as they are, cannot be stood on if you parachute onto them. Keep this in mind. When fighting Krakow, it is important to note that you have 3 streams of stars coming out of your star shooter. Yes, this is called a star shooter. Keeping this in mind, it is optimal to get as close to Krakow as possible so you can kill him more quickly. Also, if you plan to speedrun this game, you are obligated to bump this sleeping Waddle Dee in every run. The cannonballs of Castle DDD are set on cycles, because of course they are. So is the other type of cannon, for that matter. Because of this, it's very easy to get thrown off by the cycles not being where you're used to them being, so be prepared. It is also faster to kill this big Waddle Dee with an arrow rather than the smaller Waddle Dees. We've made it to the final boss, but not before revisiting some old bosses, in which you can't perform the cool boss speedrun tactics on. That's not what we care about, however. One important thing to note about Yin Yarn is that he will always move to the other side of the screen relative to where Kirby is. Because of this, you usually want to throw your weapons at Yin Yarn diagonally. Once you get to the Scarfy section, stand in the middle of the screen and ground pound the Scarfies all at once. Next, immediately jump to the side of the stage that the Chili appears at, and grab it mid-air while also keeping distance so you don't knock the chili away. And in Mega Yin Yarn, you want to stay at a very specific distance from Yin Yarn to reduce lag and also not get hit by missiles. When he enters his second phase, just hold right and keep shooting. After this, you should have had a successful Yin Yarn fight and have beaten Kirby's epic yarn speedily. Thank you for watching this surprisingly long video about speedrunning a Kirby game, and I hope you feel enlightened with the information you have learned. Another video discussing larger strategies, and not just small level optimizations, might become a reality someday too. But until then, have a wonderful day.